Welcome back to another episode of the Recharge Zone podcast. I'm your host, Brent Doty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ann-Margaret Gonzalez. We've officially made it to the anniversary month that launched the EAA into existence back on June 28, 1996. And we have two very special guests with us here today that have had long-standing positions on the EAA board. Our chairman, Luana Buckner.
Hi, Brent.
Hi, Luana. And she represents Medina and Atascosa Counties, known as District 13. Member Carol Patterson. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Brent.
And Carol's the representative for Bexar County, District 1. The EAA is governed by a 17-member board of directors representing the interests of constituents from across the Edwards Aquifer region. 15 directors serve as voting members for the board, elected from single-member districts to 4-year terms. 2 non-voting directors are appointed to 4-year terms, one by the South Central Texas Water Advisory Committee, SCATWAC, and another by the Commissioners' Courts of Medina and Uvalde counties on a rotating basis.
Welcome, Luana and Carol. It's great to have you all here today. So to put their careers into perspective on the board, for you, our listeners, Luana has served on the board since 1996, but in 2009, she secured her position as a board chairman, and since then has successfully had time presiding over the board's executive committee. Carol Patterson has held a position on the EAA board since 1996 as well, and was a part of the Edwards Underground Water District, which is what the legislature had established in 1959 for the purpose of conserving, protecting, and recharging the waters of the Edwards Aquifer. So the first kind of question I want to ask you all is, what drew you to become passionate about water and water conservation, and obviously specifically the Edwards Aquifer? Luana, I understand that you grew up in Zavala County, where your parents bred registered black Brangus cattle. Is this where it started, or can you give us your story?
Not at all did it start in Zavala County. I got involved in the water business because I needed a job.
Yeah.
And I was the first general manager for the Medina County Groundwater District, which managed the Edwards Aquifer. If managed might not be totally correct, but we were in charge of the Edwards Aquifer until replaced by the Edwards Aquifer Authority. And so this day, or June 28th, 25 years ago, was a very sad day for me, because that's when the Texas Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the act that created the EAA.
Wow. So does that it's a groundwater conservation district.
Yes.
Does that still exist in some capacity?
Yes.
Okay.
Now they regulate the Trinity Aquifer, the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer, and a very minor shallow aquifer called the Leona Gravel.
Okay. Wow. That's fascinating. That's interesting. So that's specifically what brought you to the EAA, is because of that, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. The motto was, if you can't beat them, join them.
Hey, and you've been here for that long, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, Carol, you moved to San Antonio in 1970, where it seems you took some courses in geology and in other areas. Is this where it began, or can you tell us your story?
The geology came after I'd been on the board for quite a while, and I felt like I just needed to know more. But growing up, I was always aware of where my water came from, the water that I drank. Mm-hmm. On my grandparents' farm, it was a spring that was next to the edge of the woods. And in my hometown, it was a reservoir 20 miles away. And but where the involvement started, I think, my husband and I, when we were married, recessed down the aisle to the strains of the Handelswater music, and we had no idea that was going to be the story of our lives, was working on water issues together.
Yeah, wow.
And in the early 70s, when I came to San Antonio, we worked on getting wild and scenic river status for 196 miles of the Rio Grande, with the Sierra Club, who'd been trying for 10 years, but we got it across the line.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of our real involvement in water politics in San Antonio, and we couldn't stay away from aquifer issues.
So thank you for sharing. So 25 years ago, when the EAA first came into existence, where were you all in your life? Like, what were you all doing, and what ultimately brought you to have your positions on the board, or at the time, whatever position you held on the board?
Well, I was working for the groundwater district in Hondo, and it was actually the president of our board. He was the appointed member to the EAA before the first election when Carol and I came on board, and he encouraged me to do it. He said, you know, we pay you, you can go to the meetings, you know, you're frankly the only one that has any knowledge about the issue or that has the time, because they're an unpaid position.
And then what about you, Carol?
And I had joined the Edwards Underground Water District in 1991. I ran for election to that board. And so, like for Luana, it was a sad day for me when that board was replaced. The Edwards Underground Water District was about recharging the Edwards Aquifer, which was really became a passion of mine. And that board had a limited fee, and it did 5 years of studies on how recharge could be cost effective, and we could double the amount of water that SAWS was taking out of the aquifer. So it was sad to see that go away. And then there was the transition to the new board. I was the only member of the Edwards Underground Water District Board that now serves on the Edwards Aquifer Authority.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that brings me to my question. So it seems like both of you joined the EAA with some hesitation. Maybe can you explain how it's changed throughout all these years? I know in the early days, you know, there are much fewer employees, fewer programs, and the EAA has grown a bit since then. We've gone through droughts, we've gone through rainy years, we've gone through lawsuits. So what are some of your most memorable experiences on the board, and how have you seen it changed over the years? Luana, can we start with you?
Well, the changes are so dramatic. I mean, when we started out, I mean, there was so much animosity and just bad feeling. And now, you know, it's really just come 180 degrees. I think we're all on a friendly basis. I mean, I consider Carol a friend, and all of the board members. So, as far as memorable experiences, I think when we issued the first permit was a fun and interesting time. We actually had the board meeting in Hondo, which is where I live. My two stepchildren, we had it at their school. So the chairman introduced them, and I got to pick the family that got the first permit. They had one of the oldest Edwards irrigation wells in the region. Oh, wow. And of course they were all there, and their mom was there. So yeah. it was a fun day. Those permits ended up being invalidated by a court, and we had to restart the entire process. But
really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That had to do with how the legislation was written. It was very specific about who we had to issue permits to and how much, and there were conflicts in the legislation. And our legal counsel found a way to reconcile the conflicts and issue junior and senior permits, but the legislature didn't like that, so that was fixed. But
So when the EAA was created, there was still an influx of things going on and things happening. Like we were in existence, but we were still trying to figure out what and how we were going to do and how we were going to regulate, right?
Right.
We were still at the era of water is for fighting.
Okay.
And there was part of the reason I ran was I still was interested in recharge, but I wanted to help curb some of the regulatory enthusiasm. And I think Luana and I would both agree with that. And at this point, the Edwards Aquifer Authority has really fulfilled a lot of the assignments, specific assignments that were given to us by the legislature. having to do with adjudication of all the rights and issuing of permits and critical period, which was put in the legislation, but we had to enforce. And I think it isn't until now when you ask me what's memorable is, for me, the most memorable, wonderful thing that has happened is September of 2020, when we issued the Next Generation Statement. And now we're looking to work on the kinds of things that I ran to do in the first place. And it's been now 30 years, but we've had a success in terms of protecting spring flow. We went through a drought in 2011 to 2014, and springs that stopped flowing in 1956 with a third of the population continued to flow through that drought. So that has been a major accomplishment of the Edwards Aquifer Authority.
Now, Carol, we had a podcast a while back with our general manager, Roland Ruiz, all about the next generation, but could you perhaps summarize it for other listeners that may have not heard that one?
It has to do now moving from just focusing on our own watershed to regional collaboration in doing the part of the statute that it had to wait, which is adding water. And that has to be collaborative because we share a huge watershed with other jurisdictions and with different types of water, different aquifers, different rivers. It can't be done by any individual agency all by themselves. And what's exciting is the Edwards board unanimously agreed to step up to the plate and assume a leadership role in this extraordinary regional collaboration, which is how I hope it will be. We won't see the end of it. It should go for hundreds of years to help assure water supply for people. We've done a lot of reducing and cutting back, but now we have the opportunity to add water. And what's interesting to me is it doesn't look like I thought it was going to look. I thought it was going to be adding berms in the creeks to soak water in. But instead, what we've discovered is it's starting at the top of the watershed and paying attention to the soil and working with nature. And so the cost should be less. We'll need to look at the economics. We'll need to look at the politics, but it should be a lot more fun. And because instead of being at each other's throat trying to see who can get the water they need or how you can take it away from somebody else or make somebody else spend money, you can look at the economics of the way that you get water, and if you can get carbon into the soil, it holds more water.
Well, and that's a great aspect of Next Generation, but you can't forget about the conservation easement portion of it. And where now San Antonio is limited to the areas where they can buy easements, we're going to be able to expand that to the eastern counties. And so it'll be much more inclusive and regional.
That is absolutely the wonderful point to make, is that we share all these watersheds, and none of us can do it by ourselves. And so it's become an era of collaboration rather than fighting.
And it's really ironic that this whole concept for the Next Generation was born from the controversy over San Antonio ending the sales tax to fund the easement program.
Another sad moment.
Indeed.
Right? And
but look at the positivity that's come out of that sadness.
I guess that you have to look at the worst thing that could happen to you as how do you turn it into the best thing. And I think that the board is doing that, and it is so exciting. I can hardly stand it. I mean, and my other memorable event is also recent in that I made the motion to collaborate with the downstream agency. And now we have an opportunity to both solve their problems of water during drought and sequester carbon. So
I've worked here for about 6 years now, so less time compared to you all here, but that's what I've seen since I started here at the EAA, is that we've taken a liking to really focusing on research. And I mean, it's always been around, but it seems like the next generation concept is taking us to that next level of doing the Berman Swell research and the Education Outreach Center at Morgan's Wonderland Camp. And it's kind of fostering that knowledge within the public to say, hey, you know, these are cutting edge ways that we can help, you know, recharge the aquifer and keep the quality of the water in the aquifer at a high level. And I think that's something beautiful. And I mean, Brent, you can speak to that because you work directly in that department.
I mean, definitely. It's what's special about the Edwards Aquifer Authority is they genuinely use science to drive their policy, and this is no exception here with the next generation. Since 2000, the city of San Antonio has put forth sales tax to purchase conservation easements over the recharge zone, and the question kept coming up, you know, how much is enough? And the EAA said, we're not there yet. We don't have enough, and we need to continue this on. The contributing zone, which is the largest segment of the aquifer, is largely untouched as far as conservation goes. And so we feel like there's a huge spot there that needs protecting. And that's part of what Next Generation is about. And the board members and constituents and stakeholders all back it up.
And we've already seen broad results. For example, in Bamberger Ranch, where they paid attention to the soil and the vegetation, and now they've gone from some of the sorriest dry land in the hill country to 27 lakes and ponds, and flowing creeks. But we needed to be able to, if we're going to help spread these techniques, we need to be able to document what do you do and what do you get for your money. We have to be precise. We can't just say we know it works. And so that's very exciting to have all that expertise on staff and to have the city having given us a research park land so that we can actually document it. And that
and the
is...
fact that that's even a conservation easement within itself, the
Right.
land that we acquired through the FRP.
Right. And but we'll also be able to do the economics. We'll be able to say, okay, if we spend this much, how much water do we get for it? And what is the carbon footprint? We can measure that. And some of the ways we've been getting water that have always leapfrogged the recharge that looked hugely cost effective have an enormous carbon footprint. If pumping water anywhere takes a lot of power. And if we're working with nature and having nature diffuse the water, save it in the soil, get it to the creeks, it's going to cost the public less for more high-quality water.
The other exciting thing about the research park is that, you know, we've done a lot of research over the last 25 years, but so much of it is things you can't see, you know, flow studies, interconnective studies, modeling, and this is hands-on. I mean, you can go out there and see the work that's done and the difference that it's making in real time. So that's real exciting.
Yeah.
And the other thing we have now is the modeling. The first model was back in the 70s, and it was celebrated because you could tell that the water actually moved from west to east. And now we're beginning an exciting new extension of all of that kind of modeling of just how does the water in the Edwards flow to connecting it with the surface water model. So we'll be able to tell the effect of impervious cover. We'll be able to tell, probably with the kind of research we're doing, where we can make the most difference for the springs to carry them through a drought. And that is hugely important for water supply because our critical period reductions depend on spring flow. So
Right. Right.
It can't be more wonderful, I don't think.
I agree. I mean, just as the policy has evolved these last 25 years, the science has moved along with it. And we really look forward to the future and all the questions we'll be able to answer with pending research.
And the attitude of learning, both from nature and from the data we're collecting, is great.
So speaking of the next generation concept that we kind of have, fostered and talked about, it's the future of the EAA. How has your perception of the work the EAA does to manage, enhance, and protect the Edwards Aquifer, how has that changed? And can we start with you, Chairman Luana? Can you explain from your perspective?
I think I always saw the future of the Edwards being heavy-handed regulatory. We've done a lot of work with the state and trying to help them enforce their rules over the recharge zone, and to see it all going in a non-regulatory mode is it just makes me happy.
Does it give you some relief?
It absolutely does. It's something that I'm really, really happy to be a part of, is taking a non-regulatory approach to managing the aquifer.
We can say genuinely to our constituency and people who have permits, how can we help you? We are here to make it work regionally, and it's so exciting.
And that says a lot about our general manager and his staff and the great work that they're doing.
It's hard to mention the Edwards without saying how wonderful the staff is, and then you can see people thinking, ooh, where do we get employees like this? And
I've seen what you're talking about firsthand. I first started here in 2009, and my first job was to go out to Hays County and help register wells. And we had no idea what we were getting into. It was a huge challenge. There were thousands of wells, and some of them were abandoned. And we didn't really know how to handle it. And we were, at first, too heavy-handed, which did not play in our favor. And we learned later that working with these folks and making them partners in conservation actually had an improved rate of registering the wells and protecting the aquifer than slapping fees down or, making folks do things. Getting them to be our partners was much more effective.
And we should be serving them. And
That's right. And, it all goes back to the original fight against the Edwards Aquifer Authority was they were taking our property rights. We had a God-given right to this aquifer.
we paid for our wells and we drilled them and they're
That's right.
ours.
But that goes back to what Brent was saying about coming on my property, wanting information on my private property. It's
And even
come a long way.
Even the well registration, I learned so much about how we can even go out there and tell you if you've had a 20, 30-year-old well, it might be in not good condition and you've been using it this whole time. Well, it's that customer service side of things that we can say, you probably need to service your well, or you probably need to make sure that you're maintaining it.
I've gone and talked to real estate groups and told them, you look at a well being an asset to the property, but just as many times it's a liability because it's not been properly maintained or it's abandoned. And that, as someone selling property, realtors need to be aware of that.
Yes, very much so.
The abandoned wells are one of our most serious problems in that they can be a conduit for pollution right down to the level of where we draw out our water. So that's another thing that, in addition to this program, we have to continue with. Personally, I can't think of anything more important than the water supply and getting it right, and getting the data right, getting the economics right, and then the opportunity for the collaboration where everybody can see that they're going to get something not just for themselves, but for everybody in the region.
So is that how your perception of the EAA has changed over time? Like you saw us more regulatory like Luana, and then now you're seeing us in a more customer service light. And can you explain a little bit about how you've changed your perception of the EAA?
It, as I said, I really ran hoping to curb some of the regulatory enthusiasm because regulation has a way of feeding on itself, right? And I think now that we've gotten to, we had the part of our job which was to restrict pumping, and we've done that, and it's been very expensive. And in the meantime, other ways of getting water supply have leapfrogged the ones we always knew were more cost effective. But now we're getting to look at the economics, and we're saying, and also the carbon sequestration, which is also a part of tending to the soil. And I took geology, and I thought it was about the rocks, and loved learning about how the water moves through the rocks. But the soil was sort of treated like dirt, and now discovered the soil is a whole reservoir in itself. It's a whole, it's alive. The fungi and the bacteria and all of this web of life in the soil that feeds the plants that are sequestering carbon. They're taking the sunlight and turning it into carbon.
Another good example of how we've changed approaches over the years is when we first started back 25 years ago, one of the first major programs that we put together was the critical period rules. They're in the Act now, but back then it was all rulemaking.
And it was fight.
And it was a huge fight. We had...
The first was a losing vote, and the people who lost that vote were very unhappy. I mean, right?
Well, I mean, we were totally micromanaging what could be done during critical period. What days you could water your yard, how many times a week.
Okay.
Were soccer fields exempt because of safety?
So we were being super detailed.
Super,
Okay.
super. And, we came to our senses and decided to take a much simpler approach, which is you as a permit holder have to reduce your usage by...
And you can choose.
Right. It's up to you. If you want to let people water their grass every day of the week, go buy some more water rights, and you can do that.
Yeah.
But that is still one of the questions that I get asked by people in Medina County is, what day can I water my lawn?
I mean, we get that question on social media all the time, too.
And it's like, we don't do that.
Yeah.
We used to.
Yeah.
This is specifically why I wanted the two of you here, because I had no idea the origin of the critical period, that it used to be like that. And from the discussion here, the thing that intrigues me is you said you both joined when we were still in the water is for fighting stage, which is to suggest that may have changed a bit. I mean, there's a growing body of research that states that, water, instead of for fighting, is actually for bringing folks together. So we have agricultural interests out west, our cities, our downstream interests, our environmental groups, all having to come together here for the EAA, for the Edwards Aquifer, to some type of consensus on how to manage it better than it had been. So have you seen that over this 25 years? Have you seen it go from water is for fighting to water is for negotiating and coming together?
Absolutely.
And it happened a little at a time. I mean, the first critical period rules were the Edwards Underground Water District, and they were so detailed and needed so many different triggers, springs and rainfall and water level. They never could trigger. And they presumed that the agency could go out and enforce against individual homeowners, which we couldn't do. And now it's come to, you have choices. You can decide how water is important to you and what is needed. And so we let people do their own enforcement, and that works much better.
And I think one of the things that I know, one of the things that has brought us closer as a board, it's, such a large board, as you mentioned, Brett, 17 board members. We do an annual work session where we spend the whole weekend together. We've been doing this for 24 years. And I think that was Mike Belden, the first chairman of the board, started that. And I mean, the change from that weekend forward was very dramatic. And getting to know people as an individual, not as just someone trying to protect San Antonio or someone trying to protect Spring Flow or someone downstream. We have a downstream member on our board. Just spending that quality time together and getting to know each other as individuals was a huge step and continues to be. Last year, because of COVID, we were unable to do that. And so we're already planning for this year, September. Mm-hmm. And so I look forward to those opportunities. And when we get together as a board, it's much easier to go back into your community and try to explain to people how a regional approach is much better than I'm only here to protect the irrigators.
Yeah, and I feel like it revives you of your mission as a board member, right? For your jurisdiction or the community that you serve, the county that you serve in.
Right, absolutely.
I think it's incredible that you have these lifelong farmers on the board who can sit down with an environmental activist type board member and come to a consensus on most of these issues. And as you mentioned, it's through getting to know each other and getting to know the issues and
just understanding
yes.
everyone's perspective on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, everybody needs water. We all have our little reasons why we think it's more important to us individually, but if we come together collectively and look at it from a more holistic view, it's more beneficial.
And also, you have regulations. You really have to follow the Open Meetings Act. That means you can't just call up other board members and talk about the issues. You have to talk about it publicly where the public can hear what's going on. And when you have a weekend where you get to eat together and talk about your families and bring your dog and
have a cocktail,
it has a different effect. You feel much more as if you're all in it together. So.
Well, I have to say it's been a true joy to have both of you here today. I've seen you both lead the board and various avenues, and it's been incredible to me to witness how you've done that and all the work that you put into it and dedicated so much time to it. And I, for one, am really grateful for everything that you've done on the board and what you continue to do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We are grateful to get to do it.
And I've learned so much from you all, and I enjoy hearing the stories that you have to share with your 25-plus year career here at the EAA and even before it. I think our listeners will enjoy listening to this, too, and learning about a perspective from the board members and the chairman of the board.
That's great. I hope they do.
And it's exciting to discover that no matter how long you've been at it, there's something new you can learn that changes how you might think about it. So you get to stay open and not just have one way that you want to do it. Mm-hmm. You can be open to all sorts of opportunities.
Well said. Well said. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of the Recharge Zone podcast, celebrating our 25th anniversary. Have questions, ideas for topics, or things you would like to share with us? Well, reach out to us at rechargezone@edwardsaquifer.org.